Testing. Good evening. We'll call school committee meeting to order at 5:34 p.m. on Monday, August 3rd, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And we will start introductions with Councilor Harriman.
Scott Harriman, City Council Representative to the School Committee.
Emily Lavasser, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Julia Harper, Ward 4. Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3. Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Luke Jensen at large.
Phoenix McLaughlin, Ward 1.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Okay, so next up is the consent agenda. Are there any items that members would like set aside? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is public input. So members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Speakers must adhere to our public comment policy, BEDH, which is available in the back of the room or on the LPS website. These meetings exist to conduct school committee business. The purpose of public comment is to share thoughts on school and educational matters. Committee members and school staff will not reply during this time. Comments must be directed to the chair and be civil. By law, comments may not pertain to specific staff or students. Comments about individuals must be directed privately to the appropriate LPS staff. Student privacy must be maintained. The public comment period is 30 minutes unless extended due to unusual circumstances. Priority goes to Lewiston residents and parents, students, or employees of LPS. Before starting, please state your name, town or city of residence, and affiliation to LPS. Is there anyone who wishes to give public comment at this time? Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, David Rackmouse, Ward 1, resident and taxpayer. Schools are reflections of their communities, and the more involved the community is in the schools, the better. It has been good to hear committee members call for more engagement with the schools, but there may be some challenges with making that happen in Lewiston. If you're not familiar with the name of Abner Mikva, he was a federal judge who served as chief judge of the DC Circuit Court of Appeals in the 80s and early 90s. He told a story of how, as a young man, he had moved to Chicago to attend law school. It was 1948, an election year. And being interested in politics, he walked into the local ward headquarters of the Democratic Party. He met the ward representative to the city committee and said, "I'm here to volunteer for the campaigns of Adlai Stevenson and Paul Douglas." The boss pulled a cigar out of his mouth and said, "Who sent you?" Mikva replied, "Nobody sent me. I just want to help the campaigns." "Well, if nobody sent you, then get out of here. We don't need anybody that nobody sent." I share that story in part because as we seek to involve more parents, guardians, and other community members, we should keep some perspective. First, many, if not most, parents and guardians in the community don't have the time or the energy to commit to the schools. They may be working multiple jobs for low pay or caring for sick or elderly relatives. Others may face language barriers or other obstacles to feeling comfortable and welcome in these settings. In other words, it takes a certain amount of privilege. Second, in the spring, I was able to knock on some doors in my neighborhood as part of the Sunlight in Our Schools initiative. I encountered several sets of parents that tried to engage with the middle school to support their athletic programs with uniforms, equipment, and volunteer coaching time. They were told by a staff member, "Thanks for the offer, but that's not going to work," which seems to point to a closed and struggling system. Improvements will take time and dialogue. The committee needs to hear from the broader community about the issues they are dealing with in our schools. And the committee should ensure that anyone who does come forward with concerns does not face adverse consequences. That single change could make a world of difference for our schools and our community and the wider community. Fear of speaking out and cynicism about the impacts should not be the defining characteristics of Lewiston. If we can talk about the problems, we should be able to come up with solutions which knit the community together.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Go right ahead.
My apologies. Sorry about that. Hi everybody. My name is Amran. I'm from Ward 3. I'm just wanted to talk about resources that are being built for youth in the community. For example, youth's need for outdoor spaces and indoor spaces. For example, the basketball court and the soccer courts. I know, or the soccer field, sorry. I know a lot of, I know this conversation has happened prior, but I've just noticed a few things with the youth. For example, one of the youth actually started a basketball program with over just 200 youth that were involved. And they were all Lewiston youth, correct? And a lot of older folks were playing with them, and we were doing more so conflict resolution through sports and working with the youth. And this was started by a youth, but they couldn't find fields, they couldn't find spaces to play. And now they're playing in Auburn, and now this great opportunity has been taken away from our Lewiston youth because we're not giving them spaces to play. And in that time that we're playing, now they're out in the streets. So we need to figure out a way that we can work together, either with community organizations, community spaces, even just youth. Youth are just crying out to help other youth. We have youth that are in these spaces that want to help, want to donate their time, want to work with them. And I know that we have this like mindset of working with specific community organizations, and we want to just stick to that. But I think like, as somebody who's been here since preschool, I've seen work being done, but I have also seen different changes, different communities come in and out. And if we focus on the same thing and try to make the same change over and over again and try to do it the same way, it's not going to work, because all communities are not the same. All youth are not the same. And our youth are dying. Our youth are dying every single day, and we need to figure out what works for them and what doesn't, what works for our parents, what works for our communities, and work together in a way. And I think that is bringing in community members, having actual conversations with youth who are impacted, and working with community groups that are being impacted. The community groups that are in these spaces, the community groups that are there sitting with the families when the kids pass away, going to these funerals, working with the kids that are left behind. We need to figure out how we as a system, because you guys are the ones that are making these rules, can work with them. Because at the end of the day, I'm kind of tired of going to funerals. I'm tired of seeing youth die. And we need to figure out how to work with them and how to work with these families. And if that's just giving youth spaces and giving them spaces to just play something as like basketball and soccer, and that is saving lives, why can't we do that? So we need to ask ourselves that question and figure that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to agenda item number 5, which is to receive and potentially vote on the field trip request to attend colleges of the Fenway in Boston, Massachusetts. And I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Yeah, Kate Chase couldn't be here tonight. She had a conflict. This is a recurring field trip, but it is out of town, and it is bringing groups of kids down to Boston. And so wanted to make sure it's on the agenda for your awareness. There's information in the packet about it, and happy to answer any questions. But they visit numerous colleges that are right in the Fenway area. Again, they do this annually.
Member Bowden.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the field trip request to attend the colleges of Fenway in Boston, Massachusetts.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any questions about this field trip request or any other thoughts to share before we vote? Okay, this is a relatively simple one. So superintendent, if you don't mind starting the roll with our newest member.
Member Lavasser,
Yes.
Member Hurd,
Yes.
Member Harper,
Yes.
Member Eames,
Yes.
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Member Jensen,
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin,
Yes.
and Council Rep Harriman.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you very much. So agenda item number 6 is review of strategies in place for truancy and safety as part of systems overview. Again, I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
So I don't know if this title for this agenda item was the perfect one, but we've been having more and more conversations and want to continue to have conversations about safety, everything from data to supports, and different strategies. We have talked about some things in executive session, which I think were appropriate, but I think we're going to expand on things that are more available to the general public. And also paired with that were what efforts are there around truancy. I don't think the two are all that separate when we look at kids accessing school and doing well and trying to make sure they have some supports. So we shared a memo, and I just want to touch on some things that we shared. But also in talking with Chair McLaughlin, I have a data set that we can look at to walk through, just looking at from year to year, different tracking that we have in our system from a totals perspective. So just give me 1 second. So different things that we shared for this item in the packet anyway. So we worked through numerous things. The student code of conduct has been a big item that we've worked on now for multiple years, lots of administrative input. And then we took a full year to work with administrators. This includes scenarios. This includes researching a kid when you have different situations. So it's not a prescribed, you did A, you get B, as much as being thoughtful of the whole child and mindful of school being a space for learning, but also understanding that kids have lots of complexities. This code of conduct guide is a focal point in our professional development this year for teachers and staff in our schools. So just not diving too deep in it, but just wanted you to know that there is something that exists. It is driven by data. It has input from numerous folks and is starting to be rolled out. We also work with a program and do training with we call TCIS, so a TCI, and that's Therapeutic Crisis Intervention for schools. This is everything from de-escalation to debriefing after something has occurred to try to build skill and have higher outcomes when things do come up. I did provide links in here to just different websites and different resources. We also use, sometimes you get the question of, what do you do when there's a student that has done something that you feel could be a risk to school, or someone involved has perceived that this could be a risk to schools? I'll give you a real example. We had a student at elementary school without a weapon say that they were going to get one and shoot people at school. And obviously, we take that very seriously, and we carry that forward. We also use something called the CSTAG, or Comprehensive School Threat Assessment guidelines. And so these are teams of people that go through a specific and built out process to assess risk. Was this just talk? Is there something behind this? How do they have a legitimate plan? Do they have access? And so it's a bit of research, but also work with the kid and parents and guardians, and going through, again, a researched model that's been built to try to assess what level of risk a kid might present. Those can occur for pretty big things, but also smaller things. We're also looking at building a model we've already started with people being trained in buildings and having small teams in buildings, but if we have something that isn't clear, or people just still feel get landed in a gray area, that we can escalate that to other folks or another team that can look at it. We also then do things called FBAs, or functional behavior analysis. That's when we get more clinical folks involved when we look at what a student is presenting. And as you know, and I know we can't talk about details, you have seen some of those kids in disciplinary hearings because it's been determined that the risk is too great or the situation was too severe. And we do have to follow through with those hearings. We also talked about, or shared in here, excuse me, I'm going to skip over the truancy piece a little bit, but the efforts around things like root ed and the supported process for reentry. So if we have students who are expelled, I think also in the packet, we put the disciplinary hearing procedures and statute, a sample or the template for the reentry plan. So you have a sense of some of the pieces that are in there, and so does the public. I think you all are more familiar with the supported efforts that we have for kids with reentry than maybe the general public, but we're certainly happy to answer questions about that. Also included in the packet, it's a brochure. This happens to be from a Tree Street talking about our collaborations and work and efforts. One of those things being RUDED, and to share with people that we have Lewiston Public Schools staff that work out of that space that are built into the budget, and we've acquired some grants to support the efforts around this, and so we have essentially teacher of record staff that act as liaisons who also help students with opportunities to earn credit through curriculum and authenticated assessments. We have connections for clinical services, both formal and informal. I'm careful how I say that. Not informal clinical, but sometimes kids need to have conversations with others. And so we try to branch out to other community supports for that, which has been happening. And then we're continuing to work through kids who won't engage in that process for whatever reason, what happens with them. And so we've done some things. I don't know if you know the name Duncan's. He's around. He's a youth advocate. He's done a lot of work with kids and just connects with them and he's really super good with kids. But he works with kids that we're struggling to connect with to get them to engage in that reentry plan or try to figure out what barriers are keeping them from attending during the day items. And we continue to look for in ways to expand things like school and supports after 2 o'clock, as you know, which we've talked about. So we're looking at rolling out more of that this fall. But then that's all connected to what supports are in place for kids who are struggling to access safely in school. Question? Yeah.
Member, go ahead.
Can you give us a number of students that have come back for reentry and been reentered since we started our root ed program?
Since we started, I'll have to go verify a number, but I think it's near 20 or just over 20 students that have been re-entered. And of the kids that have re-entered, I know of one that I believe re-offended, and everyone else has shown measurable growth when they've come back to school. I can get you that specific data in the spreadsheets, but I just off the top of my head, because we review those pretty regularly.
Yeah, I don't need like a specific number,
Sure.
but just to have it out there for the public who think that we're just expelling and forgetting about these kids.
Yeah.
Like that's not the case. Like you don't understand the work that's going on at Root Ed all we want is for these kids to get back to school. And so I just want to make sure the public knows like all the hard work that LPS is doing to get them back, and we don't just expel and forget, contrary to what some may believe.
Right. And I will say it's unique in that most districts, when they expel, there's the responsibility to build a reentry plan and to check in on intervals that are established in the statute. They don't provide services. They don't provide education with opportunities to get credits. They don't provide an actual human that's willing to work with families and bridge gaps, transportation, what have you, to make sure access is still there. I'm proud of that effort. I think it's something that's really important. And I do believe we're doing it the right way. We have high thresholds for kids returning to make sure that they're in the right space and it's not just a formative, it's not just a piece of paper, we did a thing and you go back. We really want kids to be ready to access their learning again and be students. And we've had a lot of success with that. Not enough success, but I think it's a good point that you're bringing up that we don't just send kids out and say good luck. We really do try to engage them in that reentry process with supports that we are spending money on, that we have chased and received grants for. Right now, we're working through a Gorman grant that we got with Tree Street Youth to the tune of $540,000 that helps support that effort. It's a multi-year grant. So these are things that people may not realize that are out there. And we have had some other nonprofit and youth organizations reach out to us, and we want to work with them. But obviously, the finances are a limited resource, and so we can apply for grants. And if we get them, we're happy to do that. So we've had some other partners approach us with grant opportunities and letters of support. So if they get it, they could do this kind of thing or that kind of thing. One of them being MCI, who worked with us and said, "We have a grant opportunity. Would you provide us a letter of support?" And their goal was to work in, I like to use the word hot spots, but just is there a grade that's really struggling or a classroom that's really struggling? And they're going to go in and do some work around just a little bit of mentoring, a little bit reminders of routines and things like that. So they got that grant, and we've been planning together and started doing some work last year that will spill into this year. So I guess we're constantly looking for those things. So if anyone's out there looking for ways to get involved in the school, let us know if you are looking for a collaborative grant. We're happy to consider what your ideas are to further support kids. Another layer of that effort, I didn't dive in too deeply here, and you stop me if you want. We also have an effort called Branches, which is having community partners in the middle and high school. And so kids can use the relationships that already exist from out of school spaces to leverage them when they're having a tough day or they just need to talk to a trusted adult. So they're not school counselors, they're not administrators, but they work closely with everyone in the building. But those are not Lewiston Public Schools employees. That's just a kid saying, I got to go find so and so and talk about I'm freaking out because of a text or a bullying or a test or something at home. The volume of things our kids are dealing with day to day is almost unimaginable. And so that's in the school and that's helping. We've seen some good numbers from that, including I think there was over 700 visits to that space at the middle school alone last year. So this is that proactive, try to get them before there's a fight in the hall, before it spills into an after school something or escalates without reason. So could we do more of that? Absolutely. I think there's room for more of it. Kids need everything we can provide. Yeah.
Member East?
Yes, I agree. We need more of it. We need to encourage the grant making the application process, the collaboration, long-term collaborations. I don't know what Duncan's is. Is that an acronym for something? Is it a surname? Is it a person? Is it a group? What is that?
So Duncan's by way of a grant, I believe connected to the Department of Corrections. It's a person that, yeah, but he doesn't work for us, and he doesn't necessarily he's not like woven into any of these particular programs as much as he's a credible person in the community that kids will talk to and trust, and he helps guide them, the best direction possible. But I think we need more of that. He's been incredibly helpful, and we're trying to find ways for the kids that we're worried about that are not connected to the things that we hope they'd be connected to just say, can you have a conversation with them? And where he can, he does, but we need more. I know Imran's here. She formally or informally works with our youth and is trying to steer them in a positive direction. There's a number of people in our community doing this work. So however we can bridge it, we want to.
Member, do you have another question?
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if there's a place that students could go to find out more information about youth groups that are offered like in our community. So we know there's like nonprofits that have youth groups. We know there's stuff that goes on the school. We know there's churches locally that offer some type of youth group. Like, is there a place that a bulletin or something that they can access if they're interested in looking into a group or
Sure.
joining a group or something like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know that we disseminate anything that encompasses all of the youth group or group or youth potential items. I think that's a good idea. We could probably pull something together. I do know that our Student Resource Center through Natasha, they have a whole bunch of resources put together. Actually, we partnered with Bates on that, and they helped us define, name, address, kind of support they might provide, how to get a hold of them. So we have that, but does it carve out specifically youth related groups? I don't know if it's that coordinated. I'd have to look at it, but that could be an idea too that we put in front of kids on a more regular basis. So, yeah. Also in here, we mentioned some efforts around truancy. The timing of doing it now, I kind of wanted to go light, and I did share a brief one pager that Jenny and Natasha had shared, but Natasha's actually been working on before we planned for this brief update. She was working on a more comprehensive slideshow that we wanted to bring to you. I don't know if that will be the next meeting, but it will be a very soon meeting. She's already started working on that. But their work on outreach is year round. It is all hours of the day. And so I think it important when we talk about truancy, we are very specific right now. It's been an intentional and deliberate effort. So we monitor how many days a kid has missed. And at every third day, there's a flag in a report, and then 5, 7, 10. And we mail letters, we make phone calls, we do home visits. Sometimes with SRO, sometimes not. It depends on who knows the family and for what things. We have a lot of students who are on the truancy list who have also found themselves on the McKinney-Vento list, McKinney-Vento list as homeless or at least unhoused, no stable housing. So we're trying to bridge those gaps. And just a reminder, we got that grant that we have put into use with the, I'm going to get the term wrong, and Sue, I don't know if you know it off the top of your head, but there's a housing coordinator that we contract with. So the grant comes into us, but really the money just goes right back out with the fiscal agent for it. But gosh, I want to remember the name. But all this person does is work with Lewiston Housing and any other landlords, apartments, you name it, and try to connect people with whatever resources they may have, whatever resources they may need, but for stable housing. And so, do you remember the latest number on how many families have landed somewhere? I don't want to give you a bad number, but the work has been successful. We had an opportunity to re-up the grant with some supplemental funds, and we did, and we received that. So that should happen again for this next full year. But those efforts, liaison, so everything from if we can get a bed to clothing to hygiene products, we're really trying to do a lot of bring things in and get them to where they belong. And I think all of those things help close the gaps for accessing school. The truancy effort has been a big lift and a big focus. I really believe we are, we're not perfect by any stretch. We have a lot to do, and that's probably forever. But we have pretty good momentum on curriculum. We have pretty good momentum with leadership. We have pretty good momentum with our routines and our expectations and good energy around kids being in learning spaces. But if they're not at school, I mean, I'm sure Luke can attest to it. When you're missing a kid 3 days a week, it's really hard to have continuity in a classroom. So we're trying to close those gaps too. I see a couple of, I don't know who was first.
Okay, Member Harper and then Member Boone.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank the superintendent and our chair for bringing this topic because I think it's of huge community interest right now, and it makes a lot of sense. Looking through the packet, I wrote down a bunch of questions, and I think there are kind of two main areas. One is just like around the trainings, the different models of trainings that you're doing with staff. And then the other is a little bit around like the reentry plan stuff. So I might just focus on the first one first with the trainings, because that kind of just goes along with what we've been talking about of late. But for people following at home, there's a large agenda packet, but there's a something labeled 06, and it's called Innovative Supports, and that was the letter that our superintendent wrote, it sort of setting up this discussion. And in it, you mentioned a couple different training models, TCIS and CSTAG. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, which are, different trainings that you're bringing in, establishing a trauma-informed culture, and addressing things and assessing risks and helping to repair harm. I think that's great. And I wanted to also add that I have some questions around just like which staff get trained and how many staff get trained. And also the multilingual department got a grant recently and put together a training that was offered on 2 separate days for LPS staff, and the school committee was invited, and I was grateful to and lucky that I was able to attend. The grant was, or the training was called Understanding the Refugee and Immigrant Journey, Trauma-Informed Support for Students. And one of the things that was brought up by the doctor who was doing the training is that, or the professor, was that, poverty often creates conditions of trauma as well, and we know that there's just an incredibly high amount, over 50% of our students qualify as economically disadvantaged, actually over 60%. And so, just kind of bringing up the importance of kind of just assuming, like always assuming that a student probably has trauma, and that it's really important for all staff, not just our educators and our counselors and all of that, but also like our bus drivers and the front office staff, who are the first people that interface with the student or the family coming in, and how sometimes if the student has a bad experience, like on their way into school, or their family, it can kind of like, you've already kind of lost them. And so, yeah, so questions around, which staff are getting those trainings. And also, I was so grateful to be invited to that training. I think the school committee could really also benefit from, being invited to some of those professional development opportunities, since we are kind of, overseeing, well, obviously we need to make the best decisions for all our students. But that I think could be really helpful. And then, yeah, I think that's my set of, and also just for students. So I think, I know there's a lot of social emotional training and learning that happens with students that's integrated into the school, but students being trained in some of these sort of de-escalation and conflict resolution could also be really, really helpful. So yeah, that's that set of questions.
I can get you all kinds of specific numbers too. I don't know if you want to come up to just share some pieces, but Sue was kind of giving me hand gestures. I think Natasha said there was over 200 families that have access, or that have been sent or shared with the housing navigator position.
Yeah, she mentioned, I just reached out to her quickly, and she said she would say that our navigator has connected with everyone and has provided financial support to 80% of the students. Electricity, housing deposits, rent to avoid eviction, and heat, electricity turned back on. So it's more than just about housing. It's about how to support our underhoused or students and families in danger of losing their housing. Along the PD lines, that particular PD, the trauma-informed PD that you attended, this is the second year we offered it for 2 days each. And last year we had a wait list as long as the attendees, which is we can take a total of 80 or 40 in each session. Beyond that, it gets a little bit crazy. The challenge is it's offered in the summer, and while we do pay staff through the grant to attend, staff are busy and it is their summer doing other things. So we didn't fill all the spots this year. But I would say between last year and this year, it's, well over 100 staff that have attended and were able to attend. I had responded, Elizabeth had inquired a little bit about the PD pieces, and there's some upcoming events which I can share with you with our new staff, as where Jen Labonte and Kelly Labonte are our two specialists who are providing that professional development to new staff in how to utilize our curriculum in illustrative math, how to use our curriculum for literacy, an introduction to our new 3 through 5 literacy program, that the company is coming to do that with our staff. And we've got about 40 or more staff coming in on their summer unpaid to get that introduction, because they're really interested in getting ahead of the game and planning for their students and learning that new piece. So those are things that are coming up. We also finalized the PD and PLC calendar just last week with all of our administrators, and I can share that with you once. Sometimes there's little tweaks, so to send it out and then have things. So over the next couple of weeks, I can certainly share that with you. One of the things we're particularly excited about is all of the building leaders work together to find the common 2 hours in the early release where all schools are and staff are present because, as you know, our schools stagger their end times and that staggers our PD time. So that provides us with a unique opportunity to once a month on those early release days have cross-building conversations. For example, the 6 through 12 English language arts teachers will all be together once a month to talk about the implementation of that, talk about the vertical alignment of the teaching that's happening, and also be able to work and do collaborative planning with their grade levels. For one example, the 3 through 5 teachers will be focused on their literacy implementation. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And you are always, as school committee members, always welcome to attend, listen in, participate in any of that, as long as we have a heads up so our facilitator knows that you're coming. That's something that you absolutely can sit in, participate, and we'd love to have you sort of learn firsthand and hear exactly what our teachers are hearing and get their response to what's happening as well. So that's a piece. The one last thing I'll mention is on August 20th, we have our annual Induct Ed, we call it, and that's our day where we've combined it with HR because it used to be 2 days. We've kind of combined it into one, but it's a HR orientation and also an introduction to what we call the teaching and learning culture of Lewiston Public Schools. So we talk a little bit about that trauma-informed practice among working with our diverse multilingual families, among what good instruction looks like and instructional principles. So it's sort of a full day of that. And you're welcome to come for lunch on that day, 11:30 to 12:30 in that window, or come for any part of that day. Interact with our new staff and our new hires and, get a sense of how we onboard folks on that day. Jake speaks on that day. The staff loves the bus tour we do, and they also love the Q&A opportunities that we provide with Karen and Jake. Every year, those are the things that come up as things that they really appreciate. Time to connect with administrators, get to know Jake and Karen and the other staff as well. So those are immediate things coming up, and I can certainly share that PLC calendar with you, and I invite you to reach out to me if you have any questions about where it's appropriate. You can see some of our PSYOP PD in action. You can see schools working on their strategic plans focused on attendance and improving instruction. Those are all the different things that happen during those meeting times. Again, just reach out to me. I can connect you with the administrators, or you can connect with the principal directly if you have questions about, attending something that's happening at a particular building in that time.
Member Bowden, you had your hand up? Oh, you have something?
Can I just real quickly share? So I went to my screen and could see it flip over here, but I went to look for, this is actually last year's PD calendar. So I think sometimes we don't share all the things that we're doing. So sometimes the trauma-informed pieces are a one-off. Sometimes they are, like Dr. Abdi, who's here, she's researched this for years, knows exactly what she's talking about. She's been here now 3 times, I think. Does a great job. But just to give you an idea, again, this is the 25-26 calendar. So the new one is hot off the press, but we see the curriculum components. We build in the collaboration time for folks because teachers have asked for that. But you get into things, PSYOP is all about instruction for literacy and learning and multilingual supports, but we're also finding that students who have gaps oftentimes correlates with generational poverty, really respond to and show growth with the PSYOP model. So that's something that we've adopted. TCIS is a 40-hour de-escalation training. It also has physical restraints as part of the training. We don't focus on the physical restraints as much as de-escalation. What I love about that training is it works on adults as well. I use it at home. My wife and I both train, which is problematic because we both de-escalate, and it's like, we're both calm, kind of. But it really is a good toolbox. You can see here the trauma-informed support for students. That list up top, those are all optional trainings. And then things like PSYOP, not optional, but optional reinforcers or enrichments on top of it. But then we have the coaching model pieces that go with it. And so you don't just get SIOP training, you get time with someone to help you facilitate the actual use of the training. I think doing training but not monitoring implementation is always problematic. So this, again, we can share this with you, but this is last year. And I mean, I can scroll and I don't want to talk about every single line and every single training that we do, but our professional development schedule is pretty robust. And we've gotten that feedback from staff, whether they're here or not. We've had people say, I've never had so many opportunities for professional development as I have here. So
People coming from other districts in particular. I don't know if you can put that back up, Jake, just for context, if you scroll over to the right so that you can see all the different groups that we actually have to, like our ed techs, our clinicians, OT. So there's a calendar and then every group has all of the different PDs that they're doing as well. Looks a little different this year. Again, it'll be up on the website and I can share that with you. But what's nice is that in that 2-hour block, all of our clinicians can work together. All of our school counselors can work together, instead of trying to meet for that 45 minutes that might cross over with travel time. So, you know, I really applaud our district management, our leadership team that worked together with us on this, which is our principals and directors and some of our assistant directors. We're really excited about this. There is a lot that we do with our staff, and principals are being really thoughtful about how to fit all that in. And one of the big goals we had this year was to create more coherence. So staff didn't feel like, oh, now we're jumping to math. Now we're doing this, we're doing that. So we're hoping that the way we've built it will sort of create that sense of coherence and how all things fit together to provide the best instruction possible to our students.
So Member Bone, and then I'm going to share a couple thoughts after that, but go ahead.
You just like struck a super specific question for me that I just wanted to ask since we were on this topic. There's been a few building fires here in Lewiston in the last couple of months, and I'm just curious if any of our kids have been displaced and where are we at with making sure that they're ready for the school year and making sure that like truancy isn't going to be an issue because of potentially losing their home.
yeah, so every time, again, this is one of the kind of unwritten protocols, but anytime there's a major fire, I usually get a call or message from someone from either the fire department or the police department. For example, this recent one on Main Street, we were actually coordinating being a shelter at the high school, but it turned out that the armory could host them, and that worked out better because we are in like floor cleaning kind of mode. Like we could have done it, we would have figured it out. So that's that more immediate response piece. So we're actively engaged in those conversations when they come up, all hours of the day and night. As far as kids who have been impacted, so in our system, we can search by name, we can search by address, we can search by apartment number. So oftentimes the first thing we do, like when the Blake Street fire happened a few years back, we had, I think, 16 students displaced by that, but we were able to pull up, I think it was, I forget what number, but I was able to pull up the number of the street and apartments and see a whole list of students who have been registered at that address. And then we can start reaching out to them, which we do. So we would then connect them to potentially that housing liaison, the navigator position. Natasha is a saint. I don't mind saying it publicly. What she does for families is unbelievable. Her and Rose both, and navigating volunteers from Bates and other organizations to come in and help everything from we'll do your laundry to getting you back out with what you need. So in those emergency situations, we're activated. We're definitely activated. And again, not just wanting to get kids back in school, which is obviously a goal, but to make sure that they're cared for. And so there's been a lot of that.
So yeah, I appreciate all the questions and info shared so far. I just want to take a step back a little bit because I think as we've seen with the conversation, I mean, this is such an incredibly broad topic that affects a lot of things that impact students' education as well as their general well-being. And this can encompass everything from the youth violence that we're experiencing recently in the city to building fires to just the more day-to-day, behavior management and incidents throughout the school system. And I think the challenge both for us as a committee, as well as the administration and all the staff, as well as families and everybody, is just figuring out what exactly do we want to try to improve and what exactly can we do about it. And I think, that we've gotten a good sample, if nothing else, already about everything that is being done and has been actively pursued in recent years, in particular as the professional development calendar has become, a lot more robust and these additional trainings are coming online and things like that. But I think, and I don't really know the answer to this, to be honest, but I think we need to try to narrow in on, what is missing from what we're doing. It's an ominous amount of rain coming down right now. Hopefully that's not a bad sign. Yeah, it is very loud, shockingly loud. So there's a lot of directions we could take this. And excuse me, we're talking about the goals a few months ago, weeks ago, and thinking about school safety was one that we really honed in on. And I think, at least as I was thinking about it at the time, I think most of us were thinking about it in terms of the kind of behavior issues that crop up both in school, but as well as can ultimately escalate to the student having to leave school, and then worst case scenario, behavior escalates further outside of school. At least personally, I think it would be worth trying to think through a little bit what we can do around that. Is it that we need to address more around sort of the day-to-day school behavior things? And I know the superintendent does have some information he can share about that. Do we need to spend more time on those students that are either about to reach expulsion or have already been expelled? And, I think we can say, I could never say enough incredible things about the work that Root Ed has done. And I think that's made it just an incredible impact on the city that most people don't know about. But at the same time, there are some students that just don't engage, and we don't have a good way to address that currently. So I'm saying all this not because I am saying, oh, here's the one or two things that we just need to focus in on and change this or that. But ultimately, I'm hoping, maybe not right now, but over some series of meetings, we can start getting to that point of identifying we do need to improve this area of things because something isn't quite perfect. I think we all agree with that. But there's a lot of work happening. And hopefully there's momentum in the right direction, but still it's clearly something is not perfect. Whether it is the day-to-day behavior stuff, ultimately to the more extreme behavior of young people who are fully out of school. And so I say all that just to, for committee members, if you have thoughts in that direction, if you have questions that you want to dig more into, I think that's part of the purpose of having this time is to try to figure out, what are the things we want to dig more into? Are there particular approaches you want the administration to look at, particular policy changes you want to talk about, things to set up for the next budget conversation, and so on. So that was a lot of words, but I hope that makes some sense for the purpose here. And maybe connected to that, I mean, if you don't mind sharing some of the data on the behavior incidents, again, this is just one way to look at it that I think we've seen previously, but I think might help, the conversation a little bit. It is a little small as usual, but maybe if you
I'm
could
gonna
just
try to
kind of-
zoom in by chunks. I'll just give you like an
Yeah,
overview of
yeah.
what it is, and then I can zoom in. So it's a color-coded chart that goes by year. So it starts on the left in 2022, 23, and then 324, and then 24, 25, and then this most recent school year. The darker the blue, the more frequent the incident. So the lighter, the less. And so we have these broken down by incident type. And obviously number of offenses. What isn't on this chart per se is what school. And so I can walk through some different pieces here. Whoops. Let's see, I zoom in. All right, so I think this is helpful, and it goes by year from category, older to the left, more recent to the right. So alcohol related, I think that speaks for itself. That is typically possession of, distribution of, had alcohol at school, school event, you name it. Defiant, disrespectful, you can see how that number is massive. Some of the work we also try to do is more clearly defining what is defiant and disrespectful. And I think that that's some of that both trauma informed but cultural training for folks, because sometimes defiant disrespectful can be defined as by one person as something that is very different from the next person, and it could be that they're both wrong. But we want to be mindful of it. Disruptive behavior, and actually go back a step. When this how this is created is someone wrote this up. So a teacher put in an office referral, or an administrator was dealing with a situation and then documented it, and that's how these are created. Once you start a documentation of a something, you have all of these, you have a whole menu of things that you can choose. And so when these things are selected, documented and saved, I know when you sit in disciplinary hearings, you see that log entry, that list of things. So that's kind of behind this of which kid, what grade, what year, what time of day. That's all data that we look at. Drug related with marijuana, you can see those numbers. Ethical violations, so lying, cheating, something to that effect. General bullying. And bullying is a tricky one because bullying has legal definitions. And so we do a lot of bullying protocol through policy and a form that we fill out. Oftentimes there's kids not treating each other great, but it doesn't always qualify as actual bullying. But we do a number of investigations on those. Harassment, bias-based language, you can see those numbers. Illicit drug, either looks like they're both related. I'm not sure why there's two different categories there. Inappropriate behavior, that has a whole range of things from I jumped up on a desk and started, this is the quickest way out of class, to blocking a stairwell, with peers, things like that. Inappropriate language speaks for itself. Inappropriate physical contact, that's really defined as anything unwelcomed. It doesn't always have to be like sexual in nature. Late unexcused, so if you're late too much, that accumulates. And then once you, like in the high school, for example, if you're late unexcused 3 times, it triggers a system where someone stops you and says, what's going on with that? And if it happens the 4th time, you have a consequence, and that starts to get entered. Misuse of pass. Physical aggression, doesn't always have to be physical contact, but it could just be aggression. So, sometimes people will label things as physical aggression. It could just be could be body language, posturing. Like the almost fight could be labeled as physical aggression.
It just seemed off for 23, 24. Like that does not seem.
Just you can correct me if I'm wrong, but looking at some of these, it might just be a categorization thing, like that violent incident versus physical aggression. Like maybe there's just a yeah. Member Eames, do you want to say something?
Was it a different person doing the coding in 23, 24? Because the coding, I mean, the total numbers aren't all that different, but the coding seems different in just that one year.
So in 23, 24, there was an update to the Power School system. And so some of the behavioral coding did shift. We can dive into any one of these numbers and try to analyze why. But I don't have that with me today, but that's a few clicks for us to go digging. Yep. So then we have sexual misconduct. That's usually pretty obvious, either messaging, suggestive behavior, or it could be touching. Skipping class, skipping school. Teacher referral is usually general intolerance, like just someone who's just making it hard to do the day. The teacher referral senior, it's in here just that one time. I'm not sure what those were years back. Tech violation, that's typically using phones or things when you can't, or misuse of school issued devices. So like I was on my tablet and I was looking up something inappropriate. Your imagination can probably take care of that definition. Um, theft, threat, intimidation, transportation violation would be something bus related or van related typically. Um, trespassing is on here. That does happen on occasions. The trespassing is sometimes people doing things off hours that they shouldn't do. And other times it's kids, for whatever reason, they've had to be trespassed from school grounds. Not everyone realizes this, but if a student is expelled, they cannot be on school grounds unless they have written permission from the superintendent. We do that rarely for a counseling session or for instance, at graduation, we had a student who was expelled that was there with a staff accompanying them. You may not know that, but it was his sibling graduating, so we allowed it, but it was with a staff and it was, you show up, you're with the staff, you leave. No issues. That went by fine, but it's those kinds of things. But let's say that happened outside of that, that could be considered trespassing as an entry. Unauthorized leaving is leaving. Vandalism or property damage, violent incident. So there's two categories for that. One is with physical injury, one is without physical injury. And then weapons possession. Weapons have all kinds of different classifications, and the whole range is from like a taser or pepper spray is actually labeled as a weapon, and then all the way up to obvious things like a firearm or something to that effect, or knives. We have finding firearms is not something that is common. We're very vigilant about it. We've done some searches of cars, things of that nature on property. Um, and so it has turned up things. Um, I have a box in my office. If weapons are confiscated, they come to me. If the parents want them back, they have to come sit with me to get them. But I have a lot of really low quality pocket knives. Um, there was a girl that had a taser that I still have in my possession. So it's that kind of stuff. So when you see weapons possessions, that is somebody saw something or someone made a threat and then they were searched and this was found. So that's the whole range.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, and thank you all for participating. I recognize sometimes I prefer looking at numbers more than some folks do, but I at least found it helpful. And I did ask the superintendent to share, just because I do think it is helpful to ground a little bit, like that there is violent incidents with an actual injury, a little over, depending on how you want to look at it, a little, or I guess I should say a little bit less than once per school day somewhere in the school system, right? I mean, if you average out the number over the course of the year, and not a dramatic trend one way or the other. It's not, you can't necessarily pick that up, but it's just to think about, that is we know this, right? I mean, that it is an issue to try to get a handle on. But anyways, so I just wanted to share my own reaction to it. But yeah, any questions, further thoughts on this or just the general topic? Yeah, member Eames.
Weapons, are they things that are weaponized, or is it only things that are defined as weapons?
So for that purpose, it's only things that are defined as weapons. And then what you can have is things spill into like that physical aggression or threatening. So if it's those other things, like we've had some things that are, it's never insignificant to have a weapon on grounds, but we had a kid last year self-report to the office first thing in the morning. I have a knife in my backpack. I went hunting last weekend with my uncle. I don't know what to do. I don't want to get in trouble, and turned it in. So there's those, and then there's things that you've expelled kids for.
Member Harper.
Thank you. To answer your question, Chair, I think that in terms of topics for the school committee to like zoom out and try to think more about, I was really glad to see we've gotten presentation on school safety and the schools are doing a lot and there's always more that we can do. And it sounds like there's also, going to be rollout of the free Sandy Hook Promise programs this fall, which is say something that involves the whole school community. I think that's really great, and anonymous reporting and all of that. I also think that when it comes to school safety, when we have these student disciplinary hearings, this has come up a few times, but I'm just going to reiterate that oftentimes we will get the Power School report for that student, and it will be clear that something was going wrong in second grade or something like that. And then they come to us usually as a high schooler, and at that point, it's harder to help. And so I think that looking more at what early interventions we can do and trauma-informed supports and, getting, again, opening up more, maybe to more community support in our classrooms that have collaborative grants. I love that. Um, so, so I think that that's an area to look at. And then also, what has come up just everywhere is just, community safety and what is the school's role in community safety. And I think us thinking about that is really important. People talk a lot about expulsion and how, there's a lot of misconceptions, and I think we could even be doing better just in educating, figuring out different ways to be connecting it ties to some of my questions specifically about the reentry plan, which maybe I'll use this time to get into, but I think that yeah, reentry. So I'll go into those questions, but the other piece of it around community safety plays into what Amran shared for public comment tonight around just, community youth access to our fields and courts and stuff like that. I was going to suggest that as a future agenda item just to understand that and figure out where are the barriers and where are the opportunities. So around the reentry stuff, I'm so looking at what the superintendent shared in his letter about the process. It's usually after if a student is expelled, then a process to create a reentry plan is then activated. And I was curious, what is the timeline and what is do we have internal mechanisms to ensure that process happens in a timely manner? And who exactly is involved in creating the reentry plan? And then after its creation, do we have internal guidelines? You mentioned the statute around what are those, how are we checking in, to making sure is that students and families aren't sort of completely adrift. And then the other piece is, I'm just going to say this, I guess, just around culture. That was a big focus of the training that we did around trauma-informed support, about how culture is just so nuanced, and it kind of is like the container in which people view the world and experience the world. And when families are coming to us, particularly if there's a language barrier, or if they are an immigrant or refugee family, then I know that the school is doing everything that they can to communicate, here's our, standard, that thing that we say, here's the process, all of that. But I also think that, we'll have an interpreter there and maybe that interpreter is of the same culture. I know that if this family speaks Somali, for example, there'll be a Somali interpreter, but is that family like a Somali family from Angola? Or is it a Somali family from, yeah, Djibouti? And so like there actually is, you know, language differences. And so I think that that could be something to be thinking about. But also, you know, oftentimes it's clear that sometimes when families leave after, you know, a student has been expelled, they're just, I mean, there's like a deer in headlights kind of situation. And I totally get that. Obviously, it's a very formal legal process and it's confusing. It can, I think it is just, you know, yeah, it's challenging. And most people have never been through something like that before. And so, you know, providing that family with, you know, as questions come up after that moment, you know, do they have someone who is like a culturally relevant broker that they can be checking in with? That's like, hey, I have this question, or like, you know, we need this resource or whatever, like that. So I know that we have staff who are, you know, part of the Root Ed program. For example, yeah, it's like one or two staff. And so like, obviously they can't be everyone's culture. And so, um, yeah, those are a lot of questions, but I just have to say them.
So I'll try to touch on some of it, but I think language barrier will always be a challenge because of dialect, because of regionalization, because of cultures. It will always be a challenge. All of our interpreters are certified, but that doesn't conquer all of those other dialects. And I think the sharpest realization for me was when I spent time with someone who was legitimately from England, who also spoke English, and I had to really, really focus and couldn't pick up everything. So um, it's not a great example, but I think it could be a real thing for families who are going through what is, I would say, another layer of trauma. I mean, expulsions are the worst thing that we have to do. And reentry, so by process, I'm going to kind of speed do this. Incident occurs. There's typically a meeting with language supports at the school of origin. Then there is a meeting with me with supports. In that meeting, we walk through the process, the entire packet. We've gone as far as drawing things on the board so people can realize what it is. We have interpreted packets. We have, translated packets. We have those meetings with an interpreter. I usually note who the interpreter was. We have at times had families request a different interpreter because they don't quite understand. We accommodate that whenever we can. We've actually redone full meetings because at the end they didn't quite understand. So that happens all before it even comes here. I can go in my calendar and look. I don't know how many of those a year, probably somewhere between 70 and 100 meetings with families based on incidents per year. Big and small, but really just trying to get kids back on the right track. Not all of those come here, obviously. And then the meeting happens, the reentry plan. So what typically happens when we have hearings, the next morning, I sit with Cheryl, we go through the results, double check the notes, double check language things. And then that next layer of correspondence happens either that day or the next day. So there's not a long wait between someone reaching out about the reentry plan. Reentry plans are developed with the family. It's typically Keenan, but not always. Sometimes it's me, and then I review the plans to make sure that it makes sense with the kids, that it's attainable and all of those things. And then that process moves forward. We have had some families not want a reentry plan. We've had some people move. There's anomalies. So I think that there could be some things, but to your point, I think that that whole process is a lot for all of us. It's quasi judicial. There are rules. It is scripted. There's legalities. There's statute. And if we don't follow the rules of the due process, we can be sued and we would lose. Um, but it has all those cumbersome points in it for sure.
Okay, thanks for walking through that. I do just want to acknowledge, I know Member Heard, you have to leave earlier. Is there anything you want to add at this moment? Okay. Member Lavasser.
So I just had a quick question about so when we're seeing behaviors in school, what is our steps? And please, if any of my questions seem, silly, I'm brand new to all this. What are the steps when we're seeing those behaviors escalate? Like, what is the intervention for our students currently?
So I don't think it's prescribed. It depends on what the incident is. What do we know about the kid? Are they presenting with different disabilities or diagnoses, the frequency, the space, all of those things. Um, but I would say that the more generic sense is an effort to de-escalate. One of the things we're talking more and more about with the code of conduct, which prescribes some of these things, what it is, what it isn't, from a consequence or repair perspective. What skills are we trying to build? So whenever we're intervening with a kid, it's not just the time away piece. What skill are we trying to develop with the student? And we're really trying to focus on that because if we don't continue to build skills over time, it's just going to be irrational. It's going to be the cycle of kid can't do it, kid acts out, adults intervene, kid goes home. It's just not a great cycle. So we want to make sure that we're building in the skill building piece. The tools at our disposal, I think we could probably do a session on the code of conduct at some point to just walk through things. That might even be a workshop, but it does have some commonalities, some prescribed things, but really a key component to the code of conduct is that we're trauma informed. No one kid is the same as the next kid. And what information are we using to make sure that we're consistent treating kids fairly, knowing that there's so many variables.
Thank you. Really quickly too, I just was curious on if we have any tools in place as far as regulating kids as they come into school, because oftentimes like these behaviors are stemming from a need, whether that is food, whatever stress they have at home, right? And I think focusing on the needs versus the behaviors is kind of the first step as far as how do we address these behaviors, which was your biggest question. And seeing if there is some sort of program we can implement that is focusing on like regulating before the school day starts, getting to baseline, because a lot of these kids are coming to school and they're way above baseline already, which is you're just going to see an escalation in these behaviors.
Yeah, again, I could go on for a long time, and I know we have a lot of agenda items, but we do think it's important that students have access to breakfast upon arrival every day. We do, especially with our littles, use the morning meeting as part of our regulation strategy and our teaching practices. We do a lot of work around the acronym is RULER. That's the Yale-based model for social emotional learning, understanding feelings, identifying them so that you can start your day with that regulation. And also at pivot points throughout the day, we try to use common language so kids can develop these skills and use them transferably between schools or grades or whatever. So there is definitely an effort there. Could we do more? Possibly, probably. But I also think and this committee has talked about it, we need to do something to engage our parents so that they have that same access to common language that we're using at school, routines and expectations we're using at school, so that they can cross over with it. Hopefully that will help build some routines.
Yeah, Member Heard.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add to kind of what you were talking about, Jake, for beginning of day. And one of the things I loved when my kiddos were attending school is before they walk in, they see probably 8 to 10 adults that are standing there in the morning. So you have 8 to 10 staff members that are there welcoming the students, seeing them, and are almost kind of like there in case there's like some interception that needs to be had. Like they see a kiddo that's, coming in and they're not in the greatest mood, or maybe they need a little pick me up, or maybe the kid walked up to them and said like, my morning was crap, or, whatever. But that was one of the things that I always loved is it was usually the same staff every single time. So there are trusted adults there. It's a familiar face. It's a routine. It's so I feel like there are a lot of things that we do to start our kiddos off right. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do in their home or on their ride into school if they're not on a bus. So I do know that from my perspective, I always saw that the staff were there ready to help and like intercept for kiddos starting their day if that was needed.
Thank you. So I know, yeah, there's certainly more to discuss, I think, broadly in this topic, but I know we also have other items to get to. But is there any public comment on this agenda item before we continue on? Okay. I guess the point I'll just leave this item on for further consideration is just, I think, again, understanding that hopefully there's a lot of strategies in place, I suppose, to deal with these issues, but at the same time, there continue to be a lot of behavior issues. I think the question we need to think about is just why will next year be better than previous years? Um, I think we've touched on different things, but I think it would be good of us to try to move more clearly to answering that question. Is it that we think things we've already put into place are going to push further in the right direction, or do we need to do new things? But anyways, it's again a topic we'll continue to come back to in future meetings. So let's move on to agenda item number 7, which is to review school committee meeting calendar and discussion and with a potential vote. Member Bowden, yeah, do you have a question?
Well, I just on the calendar, I've already like peeked at it and stuff.
Okay.
I'm in maybe, I don't know, Jake, if you were gonna give us a little presentation on this and you were probably gonna bring this up, but you did schedule us on December 21st, which is part of winter break. And I'm just wondering if that's necessary.
That's somewhat the committee's discretion. So there's a few things we definitely want to discuss, and vetting those dates certainly is one of them. We do look for those, but we could have missed one. Or I think the December one and the November one are always tricky because of when is the break, when is the holiday. And I know that at times, I think there's been some years where we just didn't meet twice that month, and that was a decision of the committee or moved it. Um, I think the other big talking point, and I think Chair McLaughlin is going to bring it up too, is because we now have this revolving election cycle, I'm feeling a strong need to have intentional meetings set up early in the year after folks take the oath, because the inauguration and the kind of pomp and circumstance around that is not what it once was. And because it's annual, we have folks that I took the oath, and then you got to decide a chair tomorrow. And it just feels like I'm blaming myself. We didn't have a good structure for onboarding, for getting things together. I know Member Jensen's mentioned, like, why did it take us so long to get the goals done? And it was like, we had all this other stuff out there to start the year, but I'm kind of anticipating it's going to be like that every year. You'll have someone new or multiple people new, and how do you get up to speed to do the goals, to get the budget started, all those things. So we started looking at charter language and also policy. This group, to also align with policy, may want to look at, to charter may want to look at policy to modify some things. For example, does that meeting in January have to be on Monday, right before the city meeting, which often conflicts with your assignment the day before the city council will select their representative to the school committee. So you're missing a voter. You're like, there's things that don't align well to meeting before that meeting of the city. And again, in the past, that would happen at the inauguration. And it was talked about beforehand, usually outside of meetings, which I never thought was right. So looking for good process, looking at those dates, and you as a group can modify those dates, within reason.
Yeah, I just want to state maybe more clearly the piece about policy. So the policy says that school committee meetings will be on the first and third Mondays of the month between whatever it is, September and June or something like that. I don't think that is going to be workable going forward with the election cycle every year and the staggered terms. And the reason is that the city council meets on the first Tuesday of January typically. And so if we strictly followed the policy as written, that means that our first meeting of the year with some new members would be occurring before the city council meets, which means it's before the city council chooses their rep. It's before the city council appoints any vacant spots, which might be more likely to happen given the alternating cycles. So again, just to be more specific, and this isn't directly answering your question, although it may relate, is just I think it would be worth, frankly, just editing that policy to at least make an exception for January, if not the months around January. Because if we can just have it so, let's say there's, the council meets the first Tuesday, we do a retreat, maybe the day after even. But then we have our first regular meeting the following Monday, 2 weeks after that, and so on. Now, just getting back to Member Bowden's question, so then that does lead to the question, well, how many weeks can we leave since our last meeting? And I'm not sure what the right answer is to that. It seems like things do come up in December that we need to deal with. But just what I mean by that is, say, if we met December 14th and then didn't have another regular meeting until, what would that be, January 11th? Is that too long? I'm not sure. Do you have a thought on that?
I do. So I think meeting December 7th and then again on the 14th makes a lot more sense than throwing in a meeting during winter break when people could potentially be gone. I mean, I will be straight up, like my family discussed going away for the week of Christmas this year, so I potentially wouldn't be around for that meeting anyway. But I do like the idea of, instead of doing the January 4th, possibly just doing January 6th instead, like having our first meeting of the year on a Wednesday that falls after the city council meeting. And that way we do have all the pieces in place, because it was a little chaotic this year. There were vacancies for election reasons, and then there were vacancies because people hadn't been appointed yet. So there's a lot going on. And it definitely, I don't think it did us any favors, and I don't see it, being extremely helpful moving forward to have our meeting before the city council meeting. So I would be in favor, if everyone else was, of striking December 21st and adding December 14th as just a potential, because we only, I think in our charter or in our bylaws, it says we have to meet at least once a month, right? It doesn't say we have to meet twice a month, or is it just the summer months or once a month?
I think just the summers are once. I don't know if it actually says twice. I think it's more the states first and third, but I also think it grants you some autonomy in there to meet as needed or where applicable because of holidays and all the things. I think it's assumed.
Yeah.
But I also think, and Shane McLaughlin and I talked about this, and I love the idea of, once this is established, we're going to meet to talk about the goals that you all have established and look at being intentional with these dates so that we are getting the work done that you want to get done. But to that end, could December 14th be a retreat like meeting, maybe with some basic business, consent agenda type things, and then invite newly elected people to that meeting to start the orientation and transition process? We've never done it because it's not the way it was done, but I'm trying to seek new ideas to have more continuity in the workflow so that when January comes, it's not like you just pass go and, half the group knows what's going on, the other half is still learning. And I just think the continuity would be so helpful because it's going to be every single year. I don't want to lose 6 months every year to learning, if possible.
So if I could, I'll just try to make a proposal, but then certainly I want to hear other thoughts. I think just for tonight, then the proposal might be, I think we would need to direct the policy subcommittee to edit that policy. And then potentially at our next meeting, we could waive the second read of that. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
But you have the autonomy to modify this calendar at any point in time. You can add meetings, you can move meetings. It's my understanding, at least from past practice, with cause. Like it shouldn't be rampant. And as long as we notify people, and which we do, we publish the new calendar, this sheet when it's available. If it's modified, we know it and mark it.
Okay. Yeah, Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think people would freak out if we change the actual school calendar, but our meeting calendar, I think there's maybe 10 of us in this whole city that really keep a close eye on this. Looking at a policy BE for regular meetings, it does say that, I guess I'll just read it verbatim. The school committee will hold regular business meetings on the first and third Monday of each month from September through June. During the months of July and August, at least one regular meeting will be held each month. So I think we're definitely on the right track. We should aim to change the policy to Also, according to this, we would have to add a second one in June. So although it would be my preference to have one, even though it'd be a few days after the school year ends, I get that that's more of a discretionary issue for us. So maybe another conversation. But I definitely think it's good to pursue the policy change. And I'm hopeful too that with the city council approving the charter commission vote, that at least in a few years' time, this problem will be remedied.
Member Harper, and then Member Hughes.
Thank you. I, to the question about, holding a retreat in December, I generally also support that. I wonder about whether or not, members would have to have taken the oath before I mean, a retreat isn't a full meeting, so maybe we just need to double check with the clerk or something. Um, so I don't know if that's a city thing or if it's a state law thing.
Yeah, I think we can check on the oath, but I also think in retreat-like areas, we don't usually do confidential conversations. We may talk about the responsibility around confidentiality, but no, we wouldn't be able to do things that have the oath kind of oversight.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then just to follow up, so serving on the policy committee, curious what the committee thinks about just a general direction for amendment of that. Is that like basically to say, amend the policy to say, allowing exceptions for election cycle, things like that, sort of keep it generally standard and maybe amend like the January, because of the city side. Just curious what folks where they're leaning.
Member Hughes.
I turned it off. It was on. September 3rd is when we're meeting, policy committee. Okay. And there, I think just having normally comma, we meet twice a month, first and third from September to June, covers it. Because then if we don't do it quite like that one time a year or one occasion now and again, we're still covered. So, but your suggestion is much more specific about election cycles, and I think maybe we should just make it more general, but we can have that conversation in the policy committee.
Yeah, I would actually support that. I think in the time that I've been on here, it's like every other month there's some reason we need to move a meeting. So I think just softening, it's gonna, it'll be twice a month, generally the first and third, but with adjustments as required. Yeah. Were you gonna add to that?
I just wanted to add, I think the selection of the chair also lives in policy separate of the meeting. But I think that one says explicitly in the first meeting of the new year, a chair will be selected. And so that's, I think that policy could be softened a bit too. I don't think it's good to go a long time without a chair, but the idea that it's got to be right now. Again, last year hopefully doesn't happen like that again, but anomalies pop up.
So I guess here's what I'd suggest then, since the policy subcommittee isn't meeting until after our next meeting. I think we should adjust the schedules and vote on it at our next meeting, just so we have one document and there's no confusion about the dates. And there is time to do that. We have the rough. I don't think the September meetings are going to change anyways. But so just to restate some of what we talked about, it would be moving the December 21st meeting to December 14th. And it would be moving basically the January regular meetings back by a week. So it'd be January 11th and then whatever would be 2 weeks after that, as opposed to meeting before the city council. So I just want to restate that. That would be the edits that we could make and then vote on next time, just so we have a clean document. Member Bowden?
I don't know if it's necessary, but I could make a motion to table this agenda item until after the policy committee meets.
I don't think we need to.
Do we need not to do that, or?
It's easier to just end the discussion and then pick it up next time, is my understanding.
Because the language says potentially vote, we don't necessarily have to table it, is that?
Right. I think you can vote on this next time with the input and edits, or be looking at the policy. The only thing that I would know is I'd like to get the September dates at least out there. So if it's kind of common understanding that those aren't going to change, I at least want to put those on the calendar and get them out there so people are aware, can plan ahead.
Okay, any other thoughts on this one before we move on? Okay. So next is agenda item number 8 to review middle school football schedule challenges with a potential vote.
I'll try to cover this relatively quickly. Middle school level football specifically in Maine has more and more become a recreation program in different communities. And so our game schedule has been challenged by those recreational programs playing on Sundays. I did a look through policy. The MPA has rules at the high school level about Sunday activities. The middle school league does not. And so the request has come through. For years, people have been willing to adjust their games to Saturdays, and they're now opponents less and less willing to do so. So where they will, we would still look to do Saturdays. But the question that I wanted to bring to you to seek approval was if we can't play a typical competitor on any day other than Sunday, would the school committee be okay with that being scheduled? Initial feedback from coaches and whatnot was it didn't really matter to them. But I want to be mindful of past practice of not having school-related activities on Sundays for the most part. And if we did this, it would be limited in scope, but I wanted to make sure you knew. The potential downfall if this adjustment isn't made, our middle school kids could lose games because other schools are just saying we're not moving to Saturday because they do their field reservations, their concessions, all the things on Sunday.
Member vote.
Thank you. So as a sports mom who definitely had 2 children in sports year round, if this doesn't interfere with like club sports, which I don't think football even has a club sport thing in this area that I know of, I'm completely fine with this. I don't know that I've ever not spent a Sunday on a soccer field or in a basketball gym. So it makes total sense if your life is football and your kid plays football, like it just makes sense. Absolutely. I'm totally okay with this personally.
Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm totally in favor of making this change. I'm just kind of curious, does the LMS football team play at the middle school or do they play at the new field we have here?
So they typically play at PAL behind the middle school, but on occasion they'll have like the last game of the year or something like that down here if it's available. So they get that one opportunity to play on the turf.
Member Bowden.
Sorry, I will just ask, will our football program playing on Sundays interfere at all with club soccer programs that use fields on Sundays? Because I know that like there's LASA, right? But they play in Auburn at Auburn Middle School. But will that potentially be a problem if Auburn Middle School needs to host a game and they've got LASA games going on all day long?
I honestly don't know the answer to that one as far as rentals go. But my impression in talking to Mr. Roy, who does the schedule at the middle school, was this was when we play other teams. And so I don't want to overstate that I think these are like more away games on occasion, and he's still going to try to get the Saturday slots filled. But I can also ask him to be mindful of existing rentals that are, league-like to see what field we can play on.
So is there a specific motion needed for this one?
I mean, I think a simple motion of to approve at the superintendent's discretion Sunday games for middle school football. I want to keep it very narrow. I don't want to open up a Pandora's box and have our facilities become Sunday things.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, so moved by Member Bowden and seconded by Member Harper. Is there any questions about the motion? Yeah, Member Eames.
I just have a question because I don't know. When you say is it forfeited or lost, or does it not matter? They're the same thing.
If so, what's happening right now is we lose a game. It's not a loss. It never gets scheduled because we can't come to a common time to play.
Lose a game, not we lose the game.
Right.
Any other questions? Okay, yeah, go ahead and call the roll.
Right. Member Lavasser.
Yes.
Member Harper.
Yes.
Member Eames.
Yes.
Member Bowden.
Yes.
Member Jensen.
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin.
Yes.
And City Council Rep Harriman.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 9, to resolve providing for participation in the Maine Municipal Association Workers' Compensation Fund, also with a potential vote.
So it connects to our conversation about transferring our workers' comp provider. Because of the sums of money that are involved with creating the pot and the funds being deposited, multiple of us thought it appropriate that we bring a resolve to you for your approval, just that we're officially making a change. Significant funds will go to a different entity to provide workman's comp insurance and coverages. And again, this transition was something we discussed heavily in the budget process because it will save us a lot of money initially. So
Do you have that final number?
I actually don't. It can fluctuate. As far as the fund piece, we have the general sense. But as far as doing the math and subtracting the two, it depends on when we actually enact it versus because in the meantime, we're still in the other grouping and existing claims will have a settlement process to them. So I don't have a specific number other than, Bill, what's a safe number I could say? Is it $300,000 in savings annually?
Thank you. Member Bowden?
Yeah, so thank you for doing this. I'm extremely happy to see something that's actually going to help bring our budget down before going into budget season next year. So I know I appreciate this, and I'm sure the other taxpayers in Lewiston appreciate this. So if it's possible, I'd like to make a motion to, I guess, withdraw from how should I say it? The Maine Municipal Associators Workers' Compensation, or
I
I'm
think
not
you
really
can,
sure how to.
I think you can motion to approve the resolve for the
Okay.
Workers' Compensation Fund. And I'll put it up so that it's at least up there for.
Well, so moved then.
Second.
It's easier.
Okay, so the approval of the resolve was moved by Member Bowden and seconded by Member Jensen. I think it is worth just, taking a second to read it.
Yeah, so I'll fire through it real quick. So it's be resolved, the school committee of Lewis Public Schools. Lewis Public Schools joins with other participating municipal and quasi-municipal employers to group self-insure for the provisions of workers' compensation benefit as authorized by statute. Said group to be known as the Maine Municipal Association Workers' Compensation Fund. And for that purpose, and in consideration of the mutual covenants and agreements among the participating employers, to authorize the superintendent of schools to enter into a fund indemnity agreement on behalf of Lewis Public Schools and take whatever other actions may be necessary. The authority granted herein shall remain until revoked.
Thank you. So just to restate in simple terms, prior years, Lewiston Public Schools has been jointly insured for workers' compensation with the city. And to save money, we are moving to basically this mutual group type of insurance with Maine Municipal Association. Any questions about that? Okay, go ahead and call the roll.
Member Levesque,
Yes.
Member Harper,
Yes.
Member Eames,
Yes.
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Member Jensen,
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin,
Yes.
and City Councilor Scott Herman.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. Next is agenda item number 10 to review the context behind current grading system as part of the systems overview.
Okay, I would say that part of the discussion we've been having as an ongoing piece is just looking at our systems. What do we use? Does it make this best sense? Should we modify things? What have you? I thought a good time with input from members of the committee to take a look at our grading as it relates to the different statutes that exist. So I'll try to do a quick history going back, oh gosh, 10 years or so ago. There was a proficiency-based diploma requirement, and that schools moved to proficiency-based grading or scoring. So schools ramped up to that. There was a lot of friction statewide. Adopted pieces of it here in Lewiston with a cohort of kids at the high school level. The middle school kind of delayed because of a lot of things going on, and ultimately rolled out something that's been modified a few times. And the state has since repealed that specific language as far as the requirement and gone to language that is essentially I'll call standards referenced. And I included in the memo numerous links talking about the statute changes, but I also wanted to note that we are currently grading in a using standards to reference the grades. In the pre-K through 8 model, it's about standards and the scores on the standards. I do think families have become more comfortable. I still think there's room for clarification and communication and consistency amongst teachers. But at the high school level, the standards grades get entered. And then behind the scenes, there's this computation that spits out a 0 to 100 grade, which in our community, that was something that people very much wanted. We use Power School for our student information system. That speaks directly to what was once called Synergy, but the state just changed the name, a different platform, which is not all that relevant, but Power School is probably the most commonly used student information system in our country. And this is where you enter grades and standards and how the system, for lack of a better term, spits out a grade for a student, whether it's by standard or overall. That structure exists. I think it's got room for some growth in different areas, but that's what's in place right now. And I think if we're looking at any kind of conversation as to improve communications, consistency, structure overall, or what have you, I think the committee has said prior, but I would also agree that we take time this year to have conversations around that and not just change it either right before a year or during the year. So again, in the memo, there's a lot of links and things provided, but it started as a mandate. The mandate got backed off of, and so we do those pieces of work. I will say, perfect world, big philosophy, education. I want to know what kids know and are able to do. Standards do that. The problem is if it's not done consistently across the board, at least by grade level, and parents don't understand it or kids don't understand where they're at, we've missed the idea of reporting on what you know and are able to do. But if I see an 85, I have no idea what that means in a classroom. If you can't drill down to find out what kids actually know and are able to do, we'll never be able to fill the gaps. Kids who do well academically, I think this is less critical. Kids, like many of our kids that we have, who have some pretty significant gaps, it's good to know where the gaps are so that we can intervene on those. But again, the system is only as good as its users and is only as informative as communicated and understood. So that's my brief introduction.
Can I just ask you, actually, I probably would have a lot of clarifying questions, but I guess just a couple. One is how it ended up with K through 8 with one system and 9 through 12 with another. I guess that's to start.
I mean, it was really community will. I think there was a lot of fear at the high school level that a kid's transcript would not be deciphered appropriately to what they've done, especially if it changed in the middle of their high school career. And so to think that, I know a lot of parents who had kids that were going into their junior year that were really upset that a change in how you grade was going to have to be learned, developed, refined, all on the backs of their kids that were also trying to achieve academically and show their worth to colleges to get scholarships and things like that. So that was a real pressure in our community. And I know that really pushed on how that was developed with a 0 to 100 scale. And it still had its flaws, but it was an appeasement, I think, between the statute and what our community wanted.
And sorry, just a quick follow-up. So the way a parent or student receives their grade for a class, K through 8 right now, is not just, oh, I have an A in this class, I have a 90 in this class. Part of the reason I'm asking is because I thought I've seen transcripts of middle school students where it does appear that way. So if you could just say a little more about the distinction there.
So I think in the middle school, it gets murky because you transition to that credit field and we wanted kids to understand that. So there's another layer there. But pre-K to 8, when you look at the report card and you have your parent-teacher conferences, it's really designed to be by standard. And when you get to that standard and you score it, which is another whole anomaly that I think people get confused on, or the anomaly that if I've demonstrated proficiency, I never touch this again, I need to move on to more complex things, when that's also not good philosophical education wise. But so if you started school in Lewiston and you went through pre-K to 6, when you get to middle school, it'll start to look different. And when you get to high school, it will look significantly different until you click on things to get down into the grade book to see what things are scored in what ways.
Thank you. I just want to get the very simple things up front. So I saw a hand. Yeah, Member Bowden.
Thank you. So I guess I just have a couple thoughts on this. First of all, I think the state of Maine ranks like 41st out of 50 as far as education goes, unfortunately. And I think there's just, I'm happy to hear they're rolling back in Augusta on this particular mandate, as far as what we're doing. But I also, I don't want to make more work for our teachers at all, because I think they go through enough. But I do think that middle school should be graded the same way as high school. And I think it's been a point of confusion at the middle school level for years, including myself, who has sat on this school board for 6 years. And, I had high achieving students, and I still did not fully understand what a 2.5 meant as opposed to a 3, right? Like it's not easy for an average parent to understand standard-based grading. And in an elementary level, it felt different, okay? Because it felt more like the standard-based grades were effort-based. I don't know how else to say it. Because let's be real, like it doesn't matter. Like my second grader, I don't care if it's a 1, 2, or 3 that they're getting, right? I don't need to see a 0 to 100 grade in that low of a grade level. I just want to make sure that the teacher tells me and I can understand, like, oh yeah, no, they're on track. They're doing great. They're doing great. They're picking it up. That's really what you need to know in the elementary level. But I do think there's a shift when you get to middle school, and we are trying to teach these kids that they are now becoming young adults and they are now responsible for understanding their grades and making sure that, they are prepared when they go to high school. And I think the grades need to be changed in middle school back to 0 to 100. But again, I don't want to make more work on our teachers. And the way that you just described that made it sound like you're still doing standard-based grading at the high school level and it's converting it in Power School, or are the teachers converting it?
It's set up that Power School does it. A
Okay.
teacher can override, because the other layer to this is teachers have the ultimate authority with grades.
Yeah.
Like a principal can't modify things. I can't go change anything. What's issued for a grade from the teacher of record is the grade.
So it would be just sort of a simple thing then to turn on that translation on Power School at a middle school level to change the grades to 0 to 100 again?
I think with lead time, we can figure out whatever we need to figure out.
Okay.
I just wouldn't try to do it quickly. And I also think that there's a level of need for professional development and time to make the adjustment for teachers, because the grades that they're entering are going to have an output. And I need them to understand what that is
Mhm.
before we ask them to use it. I don't want to stress teachers out, but I also don't want to damage kids, academic records based on a learning process.
Sure. No, and absolutely. I just wonder if we will see more success from middle school students coming into the high school if they're able to see their grades in that sense of like, okay, I'm doing really well in this, or you know what, I'm really struggling in this subject. Like maybe I need to ask for extra help. Maybe I need to figure something out here, and I give all the credit in the world to our teachers. I think they're doing a phenomenal job, even at the middle school level. I'm not saying that they're not. I just think we would maybe see more success if the students and the parents understood it more. And by changing that back, that I think that would be very helpful.
Other comment? Yeah, Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this a conversation separate from like what we've been talking about some of the changes I'd like to make, or is this now the time that I should probably discuss?
Now's the time.
Okay. I mean, looking at policy IKA, Even looking at the times it was revised, April of 19, May of 2018, August 17, June 17. I was on the school committee for all those times. And the day for the 15th, I was sitting in one of those chairs, well, the Dingley building. So I remember that process quite vividly. We spent about 90% of the time working at focus mostly just the high school level and above, which if you read the language of the policy itself, it kind of mostly implies that it's mostly related to the high school. When it talks about putting things in like policy manuals, excuse me, booklets and whatnot, it's mostly referencing just the high school or other things. It very much was a compromise between the community and our educators who are advocating pretty strongly for what they felt was best. So this hasn't been revised since 2019. Yeah, that's definitely going to come up here soon then. I guess there are two things that I would like to change, and it kind of one thing I think is more about making things more fair and adhering to the policy a bit better, because the policy demands that we have to be fair, consistent, accurate, and clear. And would I say that our grading policy does that for the elementary school level? Absolutely not. If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't know if I can name a single educator at any elementary school that I've taught people that I talk to that take the grading system super seriously. And I mean that with the most seriousness that I can. It doesn't motivate students to be better. It's very unclear. Like just thinking of the grading itself. Well, let me back up a second. The one thing that I want to walk away from this is to change the policy so that elementary level teachers have full discretion over what their students get for a grade. Because right now, I can just tell about the year prior when I was at McMahon. For each standard, you take 3 assessments. If they're common assessments, you have to use them. You average them together in PowerSchool, and it gives you the score that goes in the report card. So if a student doesn't do well at the beginning of the trimester on a standard and they get a 1 on a common assessment, then they start to work at it and try to get better, and they get a 2 on the next assessment that you use for that. They're still not at a 3 yet, but then they work their tail off. Then they get a 3 on another assessment. You might think, well, in a proficiency system, they earned a 3. They know how to do it. We should be saying on the report card, this kid meet that standard. But if you guys are adding up 1 and 2 and 3 divided by 3 equals a 2, so they get a 2 on the report card. How does that motivate a student to want to do better? They worked their tail off to prove they need to do what we asked them to do, and they didn't even get the score that they deserve. So to me, it's not fair. The standards, things change in the DOE, and so it's not always consistent year by year of how many standards a parent should be looking at. When you have the old system of, social studies, math, English, reading, writing, you know exactly how many scores to look for. But with this current system, parents don't have that. So a lot of parents will just say, hey, get all 3s and you get some kind of reward, or no 2s and you get some kind of reward. But we have some standards where you can't even achieve a 3 in a single trimester because it's broken up over multiple trimesters. And so, again, that's not always communicated to the parents, let alone into all of the languages that our parents speak. And it kind of just falls on the teachers to communicate which standards aren't able to get a 3 in. So that's not fair to me. It definitely doesn't seem clear to me. Again, if they prove they can do the thing, they can't get a 3. How is that accurate? It's not accurate. Consistent, again, some of that's out of the control. But so again, I think one, giving teachers discrepancy to score the standard of what they think the student actually proves and deserves is like my main goal from all of this. That's the one thing I can change and ask for. That's what I'm asking you guys. It's a policy discussion. This is our lane. That's what I'm asking you guys to add to this policy. The second thing, if I had a magic wand, it would be to create some kind of unofficial report card that looked more like a traditional system. Because like even right now in the report cards, we only give a effort grade for science and for social studies. So for students that really thrive in those categories, they're just getting the effort grade. So I kind of like the idea of having like a traditional style report card of, even just like meets, doesn't meet, needs improvement, however, whatever skill you want to use. But just giving teachers discretion to go down and say, hey, based on all the subjects, here's the unofficial report card to give the parents. Parents just don't really understand the proficiency grading systems that we use. As a teacher, you really like it because it tells you exactly what they know and don't know. With some flaws in the current system that we use. But parents it's just not clear to them. And it doesn't allow parents to engage with the students' learning as much as they otherwise would. And it certainly doesn't allow the students to engage with their learning as much as they otherwise would. So again, I don't even know if that's possible, but having some kind of unofficial report card to go home with the report cards. Again, you don't want to give more work to teachers, but as someone who's, done that job, I would jump at the opportunity to communicate more clearly with parents how their kids are doing. Because I know the parents would say, hey, you're doing well in this, but not these two. Let's focus on these. So I think it would help. And um, Power School is a very handy tool. Definitely not saying we should go away from it by any means necessary, but it's not always easiest to navigate. And if you spend like 45 minutes putting in grades for a trimester, then you look up and it says T2 instead of T1, and you're in the wrong trimester, and then, oh, that stinks, you got to redo all that work again. All the assignments that you inputted into the system, again, you have to redo. So it saves some teacher time too to just go in and just mark down here. The student, this standard, they know the standard well, they're a teacher, they're trained, they know what to give. And if we want to make a rule where first and even second year teachers have to work with a mentor, an administrator, another grade level teacher while doing their grading to ensure that we have that, accuracy, I'm in favor of that. But generally teachers know the standards that they're teaching and they know what a three is to expect there. So I know I've been talking about making this change since probably January or February, but I'm really hopeful at the next meeting that we have that we can discuss this as a policy and add that language in. And again, the only change I want to make is instead of inputting 3 assessments and then having Power School average it out, just give the teacher discretion. That's it. That's it. I don't want to touch the high school grading. I kind of like the idea of moving the middle school to the high school system, but if I don't get that and all I get is the change I'm asking for, I can live with that. But so again, that's kind of all of what I'm working with here. And part of that is just thinking back, like, the 5, 6, 7, whatever years ago it was when we were doing this IKA policy and how we really didn't spend enough time on the elementary level and how we really just ran out of time and needed a policy to move forward. So I guess I'm kind of almost jumping back to that, but that's where I'm at. I'm obviously open to any questions if I wasn't clear about anything. Kind of rambled on here a bit, but I really appreciate that we're kind of tackling this and taking a look at this and finding ways that we can engage our students and parents more in the educational process.
I just have a basic question. I'm not sure if this is for the superintendent or for staff or someone else. At the elementary level, how many of the standards are graded as Member Jensen described, and that it's a scored assessment and it's the average of that versus it is a teacher discretion as you might typically imagine, grading various assignments, things like that.
Yeah. Uh, I actually think it'd be worth having someone come in who works in Power School and says, here's how grades are configured using Power School. And so we can actually look at it and make sure that we're all on the same page. Um, I do think it worth clarifying that layer to make sure that we're all looking at the same thing. Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about just philosophical differences, but I've even I don't mean mine. I mean, I talked to 2 middle school teachers a few years back, one of whom does not give a 4 until the end of the year because that's the scope of their planned for teaching standard, and one that gives it as soon as kids achieve it. And they were teaching on the same team. And so we worked on that. But to Member Jensen's point, if you can do it, you can do it. But just 2 teachers on the same team were going about that very differently underneath the kind of umbrella of you can't get a 4 yet or a 3, whatever the scoring was. You can't get the maximum score yet because I haven't taught you all that and assessed you on all that yet. I'm going to do that 2 more times. And that's when you can, and that never made sense to me. That's not how it's intended to go. So some of that is philosophical amongst adults. But I think it worth sitting, looking at Power School. How does this actually configure grades so that if you're making changes to policy, you're doing so in a way that is also the tool that's being applied to get to what you think you want in the policy. I'm not trying to walk around it, but I also saw things with PBO that were terrible. One of them being the tool with high school standards that were entered were chopped down because Power School had a limit as to how many characters you could put in a box. And then the standard, when you read it, didn't make any sense. And I'm like, the tool can't drive this reporting. The tool has to do what you want it to do. So I think it would be worth taking a session and bringing someone in to really talk about Power School and how things are configured. Right, wrong, or indifferent, this is how it works. And then you could guide that in policy.
Member Eames?
Thank you. Earlier on, I thought I heard you, Jake, say that teachers have the final say. They can override Power School and no one can override them. Did I misunderstand what you said? Because if so, then what you're asking for already exists, but it sounds like that's not right.
But the way in which it exists, I think is something that's another piece of what I want to look at in Power School. And I will also say for all my familiarity with things middle and high school, I've not spent a lot of time in Power School at the elementary level, and Karen could definitely speak to it better than me. But again, those kind of flaws, like I mentioned with the standard and the number of characters in the box, it could be some anomaly like that that's making a teacher think, well, Jake said I can change this grade, but to do it, is it 9 steps? Is it 1 step? What does it really look like?
So, Member Jensen, the points you were discussing, I don't have the policy up right now, but it sounds like you're talking about additions, not necessarily edits to existing language in that policy. Is that correct?
Yeah, fair way to put it. Yep.
Okay. The reason I ask that is just I guess currently as it stands, it's a little unclear to me. Is there something preventing that from happening other than just common practice, maybe in the school? Now, it doesn't mean it's not a reason not to specify in the policy, but that's just that was part of my question, right? Is like, what exactly, at what level does something need to be addressed? And certainly, we can clear it up in policy, but we also, maybe this is a superintendent's point, we don't want to cause a problem with how the grading tool works or something like that. I do just want to say, one, I actually agree with what Member Bowden was saying earlier. I have heard that complaint before about the middle school grading, and if it is something that is more of an output change for Power School, that isn't necessarily more work for the staff, that makes a lot of sense to me. And for exactly the way you described it, that you're starting to enter that age and that time where you need to understand the grading concept and that how you work towards something and what grades mean. And you want to be learning the system that you're going to need to know in high school. And high school, I think, is the way it is because that's a system you need to know if you're going to do anything after high school, college, community college, literally anything uses 0 to 100 grading in my experience. So working backwards from there, I think middle school following that as well would make a lot of sense to me. But it sounds like that also maybe plays into a little bit of how things are working in the tool. So that to make a clearer, kind of next step that I'm hearing, one, Power School presentation, I think that does make sense. But two, it might be helpful to uh, maybe share some specific language that you have in mind, Member Jensen, that could then at a future meeting, we can do the typical thing of, directing the policy committee to do this, that. Which I think, I suppose it sounds like that we might want to wait to do that anyways until we hear a little more about the Power School system and the way things are currently working. But then policy subcommittee is meeting in September, and so there's a little bit of time to work things through. Does that make sense? I'll go to Member Eames first and then back to you.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to ask a different question though, so I don't, but it's about elementary school. What I remember is that it was the teacher conferences that were actually the place where you learned what was going on. But I think that in this day and age, maybe that's more of a struggle than it used to be. And so I'm wondering if we need to address things also at that level, not just Power School, but also conferences at the elementary level.
Yeah, good point. Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, if a Power School presentation would help the other members of the committee, I mean, I can definitely sit through that. I've used Power School several times myself. I just did grading for 4th grade class about a month ago using also Power Schools.
Do it for us.
Yeah.
I could, I sweat. So I'll be honest, the language that I would add would be as simple as teachers, K to 6 have discretion over the scores they get for standards. I mean, simple as that. Like I guess to add in a little bit too is it's like at the elementary level we would have the standards that you use to teach off of. Then for each standard, the district has created a rubric, and so the rubric is kind of what you use to decide what score you would give on like an assessment. But the rubrics themselves, I have a lot of criticisms of because they're not always grounded in, I don't know, like, I guess being blunt, reality. Like one of the, I brought it up before, but like one of the standards, or probably multiple of them, will say, in order to score this standard accurately, you must collaborate, discuss with, the students' ML teachers, special education teachers. But like when I was at McMahon, my students went to two different ML teachers and two different special education teachers. One of them lived in the Augusta area, another one Sabatis. I want to say one was the Portland area, and I think the other one was Auburn. And we didn't have any time to actually get together and discuss, which is what the rubric was requiring. So, and there are a lot of different components to the rubrics that are kind of like that, where they're just not quite grounded in reality. And like I know even like some of the instructional coaches were pulled from schools working with teachers and students to work on those rubrics. And so I just don't think they were a good use of time. And I don't know how much time went into them, but like teachers know the standards. Just let us decide, let teachers decide, does a student meet this standard? Yes or no? Again, if you're a first or second year teacher, you might need a little help. But like if you're a veteran, 20-year teacher, you're going to know what score your student's going to get. So I don't know if that extra context provides any help as to like the lack of discretion we kind of get at the lower level as compared to some of the higher levels. I do know that like I thought I remember hearing from the union again when I was at McMahon that the middle school teachers were given discretion to bump up like 2.5s to 3s, but that's never something we were told at the elementary level, which definitely could have helped in a few kids. So again, just reviewing this whole system itself, I think is important, and adding in that discretion component kind of clears up these issues.
Thanks. That did remind me of the other reason I think to come back to this, and despite the fact that you did bring this up earlier in the year, we are talking about it now when it's the summer and a lot of the staff aren't necessarily here to give their input as well. So I think it would be appropriate to come back to this when we do have at least someone from the union, if not other staff members here to share their thoughts as well. I think that's always helpful. Any other thoughts on this agenda item? Okay, so more to come on that at a future meeting. So the next agenda item is number 11, to receive and approve request for submitting an SVPP COPS grant to improve school security systems and access points.
So because of the amount of money, we typically bring these before you for approval before we submit. Bill, do you want to add anything to the conversation? And I think part of this grant is, it's not a lot, but there'll be some local costs as well that we have to be thoughtful of.
And for those that have been on the committee since 2024, this is the same grant we submitted then. It's just the opportunity opened up again to be able to submit, so we thought it made sense to put in another application. Obviously, the access controls and cameras are a technology, and that technology changes every year. We did learn when we put some of the cameras in that we had particular places that we would like to have more cameras on. So it's some of that kind of, I want to say punch list work, but if you could do over again, this is where you would add additional cameras or access controls. And with those access controls, the doors all have the access controls, but this would allow for like, you'll notice if you come into Dingley now, you get buzzed in. It's that kind of a system. And each one of those on different doors is quite expensive. So this would allow us to add more at schools.
Thank you. Member Bowden.
So personally, I cannot stress enough how important I think it is to add every single safety measure we possibly can to the Lewiston Public School District. So I am in favor of this. So I would make the motion. I mean, we can still discuss, but I'd make the motion to approve this request to submit for this safety grant.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so moved by Member Bowden and seconded by Member Jensen. Can I just ask, what number, or do you have a percentage of access points that don't have these systems yet that you're looking to upgrade?
So all the doors have access points, meaning like if somebody had a badge, they could badge in and get into the door. Mainly the ones that we can remote access a visitor in or a delivery in is usually two doors at a school, the front door and then wherever we take deliveries for, say, like custodial supplies or bigger items. But some of our schools, I think McMahon could be a good example, that there's kind of a program within the school of climb. And so them having their own access control system may be more viable to add to the school rather than just having, one remote access person.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, go ahead and call the roll.
Member Lavasser,
Yes.
Member Harper,
Yes.
Member Eames,
Yes.
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Member Jensen,
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin,
Yes.
and City Councilor Herman.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to agenda item number 12, the report from the school committee chair. And I don't believe I have anything to report this time, so I'm going to move right along to agenda item number 13, the report from the school superintendent.
I've talked a lot tonight, so I'm not going to update you on everything on my mind, but I do have some things. We are working on a Nellie May grant, which is a opportunity for collaborative partners again. And so as we continue to work on that, we'll bring it before you, but we're trying to ask for maximum amounts for continuation of some efforts and some new things. Cell phones, messaging will be coming out about cell phones. I think you'll hear a lot about it across the state because it's the new state law, so it's a story for the media and whatnot too. But numerous schools are doing different things, and so we'll share to people what our plan is. Routines by school have some variations. High school, we're going to start with just asking that people comply with the rule. I did talk to a few of the superintendents who have the pouches. And the pouches had, kind of mixed reviews as far as was it truly beneficial or was it beneficial for a couple weeks? And then kids started to navigate. I put a dummy phone in the pouch and I keep my real phone in my pocket. Can I configure the magnet myself so that it opens up the pouch? What happens if someone takes the magnet and you can't let anyone open the pouch? So there were some things that popped up. I also want to know that the pouches by volume, they ranged from $12 to about $17 per student. And so if they lose the pouch, I looked at it from a financial place of like, if we can work together and just try to come to a common understanding that this is just the way it is right now, hopefully it will help. Kids will forever look for workarounds and find a way to do that. But I think if we have less cell phone use as a distraction and then more focus on learning, then we've taken the step. It does help that there's a state law because everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing it. It doesn't make any one of us, the bad guy. But I think consistency with adults is going to be important. Trainings, we have a lot of things going on as it relates to trainings. And so I know Sue shared a couple of things. I had put this in here before Sue came up to share different topics, so I won't belabor that too much. The new staff induction is coming up on the 20th. You're welcome to join us for that. That'll be here, right, Sue? 20th here. And then also something we're working on with the business office in the city is in the budget. As you can recall, we had inserted into the warrant articles and to our revenue budget that interest that grows on accounts that Lewiston Public Schools holds the funds for goes to Lewiston Public Schools. So we're in the process of navigating that because in the past that didn't come to the school system. And so it's just a shift in practice. So if you hear anything about that, we're just working on what's the mechanism for that and how that will go. Short of that, we have our admin retreat coming up where we will kick off the year with our administrators, which pleased to say that our retention with administrators has been good. So I feel like we have momentum and can hit the ground running.
All right, thank you very much. We'll see if that technology violation incident number goes up a lot over this year with the new cell phone policy. Okay, so next is the report from the city council representative.
Yes, so city council meets tomorrow evening at 7 at City Hall. And I'll just mention that the city administrator has introduced a plan to address some of the violence that's been happening in the city. And there's a agenda item to add an additional amount to the police department's budget above the budget that we approved a couple months ago to help with those efforts. And that's all I've got, unless there are questions.
Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to Agenda item number 15, updates from school committee subcommittees. Have any subcommittees met since okay, yeah, Member Bowden.
Yeah, negotiations has been meeting this summer. And we were able to wrap it up last week and we reached an agreement. So there will be a contract coming through for you guys to approve pretty soon.
Okay, thank you very much. And so I guess that's it for subcommittees. So next is future agenda items. Any agenda items other than those we previously discussed today? Any other items that folks would like to add? Yes, Member Jensen.
It's not immediate. I definitely want to tackle the creating policy stuff first, but some point down the road, having the discussion about technology, particular screen time use.
Yes, that makes sense to me. Thanks. Any other agenda items to add? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to agenda item number 18 to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter in accordance with Title I, Section 405-6A.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Member Bowden,
Second.
seconded by Member Harper. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. We are in